So, welcome everybody to the first webinar of the project Liminal Waterway Countercultures. My name is Ben Gidley. I'm a sociologist at Birkbeck, University of London in the UK, and I'm the principal investigator of the project Liminal Waterway Countercultures. I'm going to briefly introduce the whole project and this webinar series before introducing today's fantastic speaker. So Liminal Water is part of the HERA Chance Humanities in Crisis programme. We're very grateful to HERA and Chance, as well as our national funders, for supporting our work. The project is about the waterways that mark the peripheries or borders of Europe and the creative alternative forms of human and non-human life that flourish by their sides, weathering the storms of multiple crises. It takes in various different humanities approaches, and it's a partnership of 6 universities across 5 countries in Europe, as well as working with museums and NGOs. Our webinar series is going to be running monthly from now on, with each session lasting an hour, and it's going to present work in progress and emergent findings from the project. Today's speaker, I'm very pleased to say, is Jelena Lalatovic. Jelena received her PhD in comparative literature from the University of Belgrade and is now a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Zagreb as part of the Liminal Water team there that's led by Professor Milka Kar and funded by the Croatian Science Foundation. Jelena's title today is Liminality and Decolonization in Adriatic Philology and Early Balkanology, Lessons from the Pre-1941 Period. She's going to speak for about 25 minutes and then we'll open for questions, contributions from the room. So Jelena, the floor is yours. I'll give you a moment to share your screen. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I just want to make sure that, now you can see my presentation, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Today I'm presenting some new findings in Balkanology as a comparative philology of all Balkan languages and cultures. And what I wanted to share at the very beginning, let me just press this. Okay, so this is the map of the geographical map of the Balkans, which Jovan Cvijic issued in 1918. It was issued by the American Geographical Society in New York. And those who know something of history and culture of the region, they'll for sure know how influential Cvijic was. And he was one of the main influences in Balkanology as well. As you may more or less clearly see here, this map is dedicated to this division between, as he termed it, zones of civilization, which are basically some cultural zones. And it's, of course, interesting to know that the predominant one is the patriarchal one. He introduced this concept of, which will be important for today's talk later, of the Balkan cooperative, which is kind of patriarchal structure in which peoples, regardless of ethnicities and religions, lived in the Balkans, basically even late in the 20th century. So the last inquiry into Balkan cooperative was in the 60s, done by Vera Ehrlich-Stein, which means that in rural areas, this kind of structure still existed. And here you can see in yellow old Balkan civilization and Roman and the Turco-Oriental influences. The occupation of Rijeka by the Nuncio in 1919 and the subsequent events left a profound mark on intellectual circles. in short, the nuncio's attempt at conquest as well as the incursion into split grounded the public legitimacy in the propaganda claim that the entire Mediterranean and the Slavic Adriatic as its frontier was inherently Italian. More precisely, that all cultural contributions were reducible to Italian influence and culture. And this is a striking example of how imperialism and colonialism persist through, let's say, the development of new ways of collecting, categorizing, and speaking about certain objects, including culture and languages. So if we consistently follow this line of thought, it kind of becomes clear that full liberation is impossible without some kind of, I mean, what is termed in theory as epistemic decolonization. Of course, decolonization always inevitably invokes Frantz Fanon and his assertion that decolonization is a violent act, which means it is basically impossible without violence against the colonizer. However, what matters for our discussion today is precisely this prefix D, while anti-colonialism represents kind of principal stance, and one can hold an anti-colonial stance both in the metropolis and the colony. Decolonization is always an act of self-liberation. So it is basically possible only in those territories that have been occupied and exploited. And in this light, the mission of many Croatian and Yugoslav intellectuals during the 90s and 1930s was a form of epistemic decolonization, which meant kind of search for new categories of academic thought, new categories of knowledge in the post-World War I world. And one such phenomenon is Adriatic philology and subsequently Balkanology. And I'd say that they represent the starting point. Adriatic philology is a starting point, and Balkanology as the culmination of this process of epistemic decolonization. And they are basically interconnected precisely through the concept of liminality. So Adriatic philology is the body of etymological and cultural research carried out by Petar Skok, the Croatian linguist, Romanist, and one of the founders of Balkanology. So he pursued these investigations over the course of like half a century, almost half a century, from 1913 as a fellow of the Vienna Academy up until the Second World War and 50s. Some most significant outcomes of this work are two studies in the field of linguistics, so in the field of toponyms and maritime vocabulary. As I previously mentioned, this basically epistemic decolonization movement in the 30s, there was an organization named the Adriatic Guard. It was, its patron was King Alexander Karađorđević himself. But this organization aimed at like protecting the Slavic Adriatic. And many intellectuals, many writers, including Viktor Caremin, Jakša Ravlić, Niko Bartolović, and many others, gathered around this idea. And Petar Skok was one of these intellectuals whose contribution remained attached to this idea of the Slavic Adriatic in the long run. Another important, so one of, let's say, crucial outputs was Od koga naučiše Jadranski Jugosloveni pomorstvo i ribarstvo, from whom did the Yugoslavs learn their maritime and seafaring terminology. And the later was Slavdom and Romanity on the Adriatic Islands, which was published by the Yugoslav Academy of Science and Arts in 1950. So These studies basically demonstrate that toponyms and maritime terminology don't bear this Italian layer as something essential. In fact, it turns out that the Italian layer is the thinnest and the most recent one. Moreover, Skok shows how many names, especially those of islands in the Adriatic archipelago, represent adaptations of ancient Greek names into Slavic and Croatian phonetics. Civilization, both rural and urban, Skok argues, predates not only Italians and the Slavic settlement in the Balkans, but even the Romans, and go back to Greeks and even indigenous peoples, indigenous civilizations of the Balkans. To summarize, I'd say that Adriatic philology offers two crucial lessons. First, although philology is frequently equated with some kind of nationalist and exclusionary narratives, it can be, in fact, an indispensable part of epistemic decolonization because of this methodology of unlayering. So, and I think this will immediately become clearer when this is when I show this linguistic map. And Petar Skok made a linguistic map for every place, every toponym in the Adriatic. So as you may see here, it's Istria and Horvatia in Greek script. And why did he do this? Well, he wanted to show that how almost irrelevant this Italian and even Roman layer was, because I mean, this is the north part of the Adriatic, but in some cases, for example, Hvar, the island of Hvar, is obviously Paros. Here we see Cres as a descendant of Herso, and maybe Vis and Isa is among those that are like most obviously attached to this classic Greek legacy. And this layering of languages and many linguistic aspects evokes return to deeper historical strata, and this kind of philological methodology, this kind of approach, does not narrate the story of a uniform identity, but a story of hybridity, liminality, and some kind of intrinsic interconnection of cultures. So this brings us to the second major insight, which is that liminality functions as a sort of strength and resilience in the sense of historical survival. Liminality here can be defined as a form of cultural hybridity that entertains difference without an assumed or imposed hierarchy. In this case, we see, as we can see on the map as well, the fusion of Greco-Roman culture, which the Slavs encountered upon arriving in the Balkans, with their own Slavic roots, which is Slavic phonetics in this case. And the essential question that Petar Skok posed in his research journey was why, what's the reason why the Slavs managed to live in the region for like centuries, unlike many other cultures and civilizations that simply disappeared. And the main argument is that this capacity for hybridization was their asset which made them survive. So during the 1930s, Skok found a reliable collaborator in Milan Budimir, the Serbian classical philologist. In 1934, Ratko Parežanin and Svetozar Spanačević founded the Balkan Institute in Belgrade, whose patron was King Aleksandar Karađorđević, who was actually killed in Marseille a few months later in October in 1934. While Parežanin and Spanačević managed organization and finances, Skok and Budimir directed all research and publishing activities, and they published two texts. One, Skok published Balkan Studies manifesto, basically, but they had a joint publication called The Balkan Destiny. And both of these texts could be considered manifestos of Balkanology as a comparative philology of all Balkan languages and cultures. As with Adriatic philology, the primary motivation was to oppose colonialist representations of the Balkans as culturally irrelevant and backward, and always defined in opposition to European modernity. In these texts, Skok and Budimir offered a completely inverted, subverted image, which was grounded in the principle of liminality as a kind of a trans-historical hybridity of diverse cultural strata that enrich one another. For Skok and Budimir, the Balkans wasn't a radiation center of culture. And even from a contemporary viewpoint, it's even more striking, I'd say, how they define Balkan destiny. So in the eponymous text, they basically say if such a destiny exists at all, it means living with the other, like coexisting, living together with the other. And they use this metaphor of svetske verige, world changed, because the Balkans, as they see it, and probably as Cvic saw it as well, the Balkans is a link between three ancient continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And the region is home to diverse ethnic groups and all Abrahamic religions. Both Skok and Budimir saw this, and especially this aspect of religious coexistence and tolerance as an immense potential for establishing a just society that would eventually transcend the nation state. They also attached great importance to the Ottoman legacy and to Islam in the Balkans more broadly. Of course, the revitalization of this legacy was partly a tactical move, which was designed as a critique of European colonialism. They argued that delayed modernization of the region was the result of colonial policies imposed by Britain, Austria, and Italy, rather than any so-called Oriental despotism. The principle of liminality, which they connect both to the Balkans and to the Adriatic, also implies unconditional religious tolerance. And they keep reminding us that neither Byzantium nor the Ottoman Empire differentiated their citizens on the basis of their religious beliefs. So they employ this concept of Balkan cooperative, which they borrowed from the geographer Jovan Cvic, as cooperative of variations. In relation to this form of social and political organization, the West appears as a far more totalitarian system, and they use precisely this word, totalitarian. They go even further, describing Balkan sobriety and Balkan destiny as avant-garde in a way in relation to Europe, because religious tolerance and national equality, equality of the nations, at that point, and let's remember these are the 30s, as they saw it, I mean, were values toward which Europe kind of still aspired, while they have existed in the Balkans for centuries. However, I would like to emphasize that, I mean, their view is not black and white, and they have more of a nuanced approach to the Western Europe, which demonstrates how how unique their conception of Balkanology is. And I would here, of course, repeat that Balkanology as comparatist philology is also grounded in the philology of liminality. So, as I stated at the beginning, anti-colonialism is a principled stance, whereas every act of decolonization must be concretized. So, in the 1930s, in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, we also see the emergence of Paleo-Balkan theories. Those are corpora readings of the Balkan mentality through basically a psychoanalytic methodology. And I would drop a few names here, such as Vladimir Dvorniković, known for the Characterologia Jugoslavena, Vojin Matic. I think both of them were psychoanalysts, and archaeologist Dragoslav Srejović, and they shared the argument that the Balkans was structured as the unconscious, which is a timeless condition that does not distinguish between past, present, or future. My colleague Marko Teodorsky even used the metaphor of descensus ad infernus to describe how Paleo-Balkanologists imagine the region. This metaphor, I think, kind of points to a very dark imagination, which is not far from the colonial gaze that saw the Balkan as trauma, wilderness, shadow, blah, blah, blah. Although Skok and Budimir rightly criticize European colonialism, their decolonial position acknowledged European achievements such as individualism and the nation state, in the sense that they saw nation building processes and revolutions as essential to the Balkan Risorgimento as well. And that's how they term the national revolutions of the 19th century Balkan Risorgimento. They believe that the unique contribution of Balkan cultures lay precisely in this hybridization of a liminal, authentically Balkan mentality of tolerance with this type of modernist achievements, because it is through European legacies that peoples in the Balkan neutralized this negative theocratic legacy of Byzantium and Ottoman rule. So by employing this type of methodology and criticism, they simultaneously opposed colonialism, but they also avoided this approach that Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak termed as musealization of cultural nationalism. So they employed the philology of liminality to avoid any type of to avoid essentialism, basically. And I would like to go toward the conclusion with the insight that this methodology could be inspirational in the sense that epistemic decolonization is a way of confronting the past, but without liminality. It's kind of, without liminality, it can be very limiting in a way, because this principle ensures an orientation toward the future. And in this case, they imagine the Balkans of the future as an irradiation center again, and as the center of a shared future, which render the Balkans important not only to the peoples of the Balkans, but to Europe and the world generally. And at the very end, I would just like to share a few references. So these ideas indeed continued to be developed. Here, this is a researcher in Byzantology, Ivan Đurić, who wrote about the twilight of Byzantium, and Trajan Stojanović, who actually thoroughly dealt with this problem of belated modernization and its and the reasons for the belated modernization in the Balkans. And here, this is oh, what did it just do? So yeah, there is this small island behind the island of Biševo, and its citizens wanted to had this initiative for saving the island's lands, and they basically published, I think, most of Petar Skok's research in the Adriatic Philology online. So with the maps with the map scans as well. So yeah, well, yeah, I could conclude here, and also by like acknowledging the fact that my time management skills were like impeccable. Thank you very much for your attention. I can now stop sharing and we can proceed with the discussion.
Thank you so much. Your time management skills were indeed impeccable. And yeah, really rich and fascinating proposal presentation. Does anyone want to kick us off with questions? Maybe I'll start while other people are composing their thoughts. Just maybe to pick up on the final things that you were saying about the legacy, and I guess maybe to ask how far that legacy has echoed or not. Would you say that the what you're retrieving in your presentation is kind of by now completely submerged, or is there a kind of living legacy for this kind of liminal decolonization in the Balkans today?
Well, I think it's interesting that in the 70s, we witnessed the revival of these paleo-Balkanologist tendencies. And both, I'd say, Trajan Stojanović and Ivan Đurić they wrote in late 80s, early 90s. And at that point, the theory of nesting Orientalisms by Milica Bakić-Hayden and also Maria Todorova emerged. So I'd say that, which is, I mean, I also share this, let's say, Petar Skok's stagist view of history. So in certain periods, people are like more oriented toward this, like, let's say, negative hermeneutics or dealing with the negative part of certain legacies. So I think that this kind of this tendency to defend from Balkanism as a label at some point actually went too far, and then Balkanology meant like just constantly proving that it's not it's not that backward. But now I think after even, and what's interesting, I think that they both Budimir and Skok write with the ongoing crisis of Europe and European mentality, European culture in mind. So and now we live we definitely live in such times. So maybe I think this is a good path forward, because I think it's always sometimes it's the easiest way to go backward and say we had something which was better, more cultured, etc. But it's really difficult to approach it kind of dialectically, to revitalize it, but to also see its limits, and what of these legacies can indeed be retrieved. So I don't think today, I think, I borrowed a lot from Suzana Vuljevic, who basically wrote the whole dissertation about conceptions of Balkan Federation in the 20th century. She also mentions, and she writes a lot about Skok and Budimir and their let's say, research journey as important part of that history. So I think that step by step, there are some quite interesting developments in the field.
Any in the room have questions? I've got more if not. I was going to maybe ask about the kind of politics of making the sort of claim around decolonialism, and I suppose I guess it's like maybe the last 20 years, maybe in the 2000s, interventions that were kind of talking about post-socialist contexts in relation to post-colonial studies, and since then there's been quite huge flowering of scholars taking post-colonial and now more recently decolonial approaches to kind of post-socialist space, and increasingly to the kind of imperial continental empires that preceded Stalinism. But at the same time, there hasn't been to my knowledge, much of a kind of parallel development among scholars of decolonialism and post-colonialism, kind of expressing interest in Europe's continental empires or in kind of post-socialist contexts. So do you have any thoughts about that? Like what the kind of political implications of making a theoretical move around emphasizing decoloniality in this period might be?
Yes, I mean, I wrote a paper following this like insights and send it to the Umjetnost riječi journal, and I also struggled to find a proper like theoretical framework, because of course like decolonization is definitely anachronistic use of this term, because it's inseparably linked to the decolonization movements in the second half of the 20th century, and also like post-colonial studies were, I mean, they had its peak with Maria Todorova nesting Orientalism's theory and everything. So, well, I found an interesting, quite interesting paper from which I borrowed this, let's say, let me just find it. It's like, yeah, it's Catherine Baker, Post-Coloniality Without Race, Racial Exceptionalism, and Southeast European Cultural Studies. Because she criticizes the tendency of researchers in the Slavic studies, Balkan studies, to kind of detach themselves from the history of colonialism by overemphasizing socialist socialist history of the region. And she actually reminds us that post-coloniality as a state, I mean, it's more of a regime, it's also a global regime. So it's always possible to think these things globally. And I find that part actually the most inviting aspect of the research because I mean, it kind of shows that tertium datur, there is always a third way out in a way. So at this point, I think maybe I'm not suggesting that we be like eclectic without reason, but like borrowing or elaborating on most fruitful methodologies, aspects, ideas in both decolonial and post-colonial studies in certain contexts, and specifically in the Balkan context, because as both Skok and Budimir explained, the region, I mean, they insisted on the fact that the Slavic nation in the Balkans are Slavic. They share this Slavdom with the Eastern or more Oriental nations, but they also had this history of like Westernization. So the state of the Balkans, including, and in that aspect, Slavic nations of the Balkan have shared histories with Romanians, Bulgarian, Greeks, Albanians, other nations of the Balkans. So it kind of forces us to look for more adequate frameworks to theorize on that.
Thank you very much. Just re-inviting the audience to feel free to jump in with comments, questions, thoughts, responses. And if not, or maybe I'll ask another question, which is maybe about I guess, methodology in terms of the context of translation and multilingualism and the kind of if you could say something about kind of what it's like to do this archival work across multiple languages and what are there limits to that? I guess linguistic limits, are there limits to doing this kind of archival research in a multilingual context? And then we'll go to Tony's question after that. I guess, like for example, you were talking about the significant, I guess, reading these texts and reading the way that they use philology, using the way they use different scripts in the maps, using the kind of different linguistic terminologies, and they move between them, and that's part of the politics of their intervention. And that seems to me like a huge challenge for the researcher to be able to sort of catch all of that.
Yeah, it is a challenge, but I think it's also a statement, a political statement in a way, because philology is mostly associated with this kind of exclusionary, very identity-centered narratives. And here we basically have a different situation on the ground in the sense that you have to read texts and you have to read languages that you did not expect there. So that's kind of the best part of it. And then it also offers insight into how these categories are being created. So how some legacies are like ruled out and the other persist. So it's very, I mean, it's very unsettling in a way, but I think it's definitely worth that effort because, well, we live in times when people like obviously cry for some kind of a collective unity, solidarity, identity, and it really is a challenge to from a contemporary point of view to think of some kind of solidarity or collective action beyond these basically fictions, like we share the same language, we share the same culture. So, and then you discover that you also share maybe even more with some other collectives. So, and I think it also has to do with post-colonial and decolonial frameworks, because India is, I mean, I was also like struck to discover that in India there is like more than 200 languages spoken, and it's like 18 official languages. But people still live in the same country, and here in the ex-Yugoslav region and in the Balkans, we often like quarrel about things that I mean sound like trivia in comparison to how big the world is. So that's like I say that I would underscore as a major lesson from this research. Like remember how big the world is.
Thank you. Tony, go ahead.
Thanks, Jelena, for this great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and it struck me. Actually, I was thinking about the it reminded me that the Netherlands, that I'm mostly focused on, fashions itself as a maritime country with a maritime history. With it was a seafaring power. The contribution to the maritime development, shipbuilding, everything is so codified, and it's a part of the national heritage. There are literally bookshelves of books about the seafaring, shipbuilding techniques and everything. Now I was wondering, in this decolonial move, this discursive move from Petar Skok, that he actually mentions something, a contribution that the Slavic seafaring peoples contributed to the Mediterranean, or to I don't know. Is there a visible trace, let's say, in terms, in law, or I don't know, seafaring, shipbuilding, a contribution that lasts till this day, in something in a move that can also legitimate the I don't know, the side that you say we weren't only colonized, but we also did contribute to this development. Because I was thinking in my whole childhood and everything, Croatia is seen as a country on the seaside, but not a seafaring or a maritime country. That's really interesting. It only has that touristic part in it, but nothing that I can remember out of my schooling that has to do with sea. I don't actually. It's a bit strange for a country that's so much interconnected with the sea that I do not actually. Yeah, the terms that I have about the sea are actually just like normal things. I'm not specific in that.
Well, thank you for this question. Actually there is Skok thoroughly analyzes this material culture, and both him and Milan Budimir, they share this argument that linguistics reveal that Slavic people brought these skills. They already had this like seafaring and maritime skills when they came to the Balkans, and that without these skills, they would not survive in the region, because their argument is essentially that Slavic peoples were able to deal with both with the Balkans as these heavy mountains and the sea coast, and that these skills mutually reinforced each other, and that's how they managed to survive in the region of the world chains for centuries. And they also, yeah, because I mean, there is like, when we went to school, the colonization of the Balkans by the Slav was presented as some kind of a violent act, but actually linguistic research reveals that it was not that violent at all. So they kind of colonized this space, but they also kind of coexisted with indigenous cultures of the Balkans. So, but yeah, Petar Skok especially, but both Milan Budimir and Petar Skok put a lot of effort to prove that language history actually reveals the ability of the Slavic peoples to master the sea.
Thanks.
Ben, you're muted. What?
Sorry. We've got up to about 10 more minutes, so if we've got time for one or two more questions, if anyone has any.
I might have maybe just a small comment or a reflection on the linguistic part, and maybe it has something to do with colonization, decolonization, but also some sort of how are people introduced to all of this linguistic phenomena, especially, for example, students at the faculty, specifically faculty of philology, because when you were showing these maps, and also you showed me them before, and it was always interesting to see these toponyms and how they change and everything. And like with the knowledge of historical phonetics and other aspects, you see all of these adaptations of language that you have documented practically. But it is just an observation how when I try to recall my study days, it is that we always, for example, if you take toponyms such as Supetar, Sumartin, I don't know, whatever, it always goes just until this layer that shows that, Sutivan, yeah, it always just the school teaches you just right amount to give a backbone to the argument, you know. So you get this somehow image that Slavic people who came to this area, they adopted Greek or Latin names. So not to go into details about vocalizations and everything, but it is never, you just learn it as a fact, and you never get an explanation. You never get to go beyond that, or to ask what was before, or what does it mean in this greater context. So this is why I think that your research, although it is on a seafaring terminology and this specific context that is connected to water, it is very valuable, because it really shows how multilateral this phenomenon is. Not just, oh, let's take this couple of names and say, yeah, this is an evidence of Slavic or Serbian or Croatian or Bosnian adaptation of some name that there is, but without explanation, without asking a question why or how, maybe even more important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah, I think the how is the most important question because I mean those people, those lunatics with these theories that kind of prove that you know, Serbs or Croats were in the Balkans like 10, 15 or million years ago. I mean, when you dive deep into philology, they are kind of right, because I mean, these words, the very words, maybe came from, I don't know, Farsi, Persian, or whatsoever, Sanskrit. But it's not a proof that it actually, I mean, that just because a word appeared or was imported in a specific context, it's not a proof that, it's not a proof of material reality. It's just a proof that it kind of circulated there. So what I specifically appreciated about Skok and Budimir's research is that they opposed European imperialism, but they did not try to oppose it with kind of pseudo arguments by, you know, inventing a separate reality in which, you know, the peoples in the Balkans have always been so progressive, modernized, etc. But they actually showed how, I mean, the whole turmoil that actually took place for centuries, and in this specific case, even millennia. So yeah, I think that it actually deconstructs the idea, which in some aspects it's very important for, let's say, mainstream philology, that just, you know, by virtue of being old, something is meaningful, but you know, age is not a proof of anything, and it's especially not a proof that something is like worthy or specifically important in a specific context. So yes, I mean, going through languages or archival sources in many languages is difficult in itself. But just because it's difficult, it still doesn't mean that it's automatically meaningful. And I think that I specifically appreciate that part.
Thank you very much. We're coming towards the end of the hour. We've probably got time for one more, if anyone has one more. Otherwise, no hands. Okay, in that case, I think before thanking Jelena, just say our next event in this series is going to be on the 27th of May at the same time. My colleague Daniela Shaw, with the title Currents of Change, Lived Histories of Liverpool's Waterfront, talking about participatory photography project on the Liverpool docks, also part of the Liminal Waterway Countercultures project. So I hope to see you all there. But thank you so much, Jelena. That was like really rich and fantastic. We'll be publishing the recording on our new YouTube channel before too long, and I invite people to check out Google Liminal Water, liminalwater.uni.graz, and see details of our events. So thank you so much, Jelena.
Thank you all. Bye.